Now we know the dumped at sea thing is just, well, it's wrong because she wasn't. We know the boat was already at the bottom of the ocean prior to Joan's disappearance. We know this entire construction of a serial killer who has an MO of dumping bodies at sea is deeply dubious. But one thing that is right, uncannily, in that otherwise completely false statement is the description of the injury done to Joan, where at least it's close, wrong side of the head, but it identifies a head injury.
Actually, it was to the correct side of the head.
Was it?
He pointed to the right side of his head. So he did point to the correct side of the head and described profuse bleeding, which the injury she sustained would have, it would have been horrific, the blood. There's an interesting point in going back and going through the articles. Just the timing, as you mentioned, of when Joan's purse and wallet were thrown out, and thinking of Bond's statement. Bond makes a very incorrect statement that authorities would have known when they took the statement. And that is, he said that Joan's purse and wallet were taken to the Saugus area and deposited 3 weeks after Joan disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
They were found 4 days after, and that was established fact. And as you look at the newspaper articles, one that you read earlier, when Bond's statement started to come out, the time frame for when Joan's belongings were reported to have been recovered is stretched out 2 weeks, 3 weeks. The media was used, and people got so confused. There was so much and so many different tangents that it was very difficult to keep track of those kind of details.
This was trial by media, is what we've had. But my concern, because of the fact that the false statement from Bond, in other words, a statement that I do not believe and I don't think is credible, because of the fact that that does correctly identify the manner of death, which would only be known to someone who had inflicted that injury or who knew the circumstances of the death. So if Paradiso is innocent of that crime, innocent of the Iannuzzi crime, innocent of the Webster crime, and Bond therefore can't get any information from him because he doesn't know, then where did Bond get information which enabled him to correctly identify the manner of death? Then we also have the proximity of the wallet along a route that Trooper Palumbo took. We have the fact that Trooper Palumbo would have been at Logan Airport and does match in general terms the description of a potential suspect. And at this point you really have to step back and say, hold on, has there been a conspiracy to pervert the course of justice at play in this case? You really have to.
Someone had an agenda here. There's no doubt about it. And, there were only 5 individuals in with Mr. Bond when he gave his interview, which supposedly came after a letter sent to the district attorney. But that letter is far more clear and far more detailed. Mr. Bond in his interview really gave some multiple choices to the officers, and it's interesting to see how they went and filled the gaps. For example, Sergeant Tamero questioned Mr. Bond if Paradiso had said anything about weighting his body down, adding weights to the body as he dumped it overboard.
Mm-hmm.
That was expressed again and asked again by another trooper in that room, Trooper Jack O'Rourke. He asked the very same question. Bond said no. And, of course, then he kind of backpedaled and said, but he didn't say that, kind of leaving it open.
Mm-hmm.
Then all of a sudden, the FBI goes out and finds this witness who describes Mr. Paradiso as chopping up bodies and tying cinder blocks to them and dumping them in the ocean. They filled the gaps there.
Yes. Very strange.
Well, they wanted to come up with an explanation, as I see it, to make sure that people didn't expect to find a body. And frankly, where it was, it's a miracle her body was found.
Yeah. That is one of the most damning aspects of this. The official story of Joan's body being disposed of at sea meant that you weren't looking for her body on land. So it was a red herring. It's telling that the official investigation ended up promoting a theory which was a red herring in the Joan Webster case. Alright, we get into that and more. We'll take a brief breather once again. This is The Beautiful Truth on breakfornews.com. I'm with Eve Carson. We'll be right back. looking to the issue of knowledge. In other words, information which came out through this media campaign, because somebody who is feeding the information into the system has direct knowledge of the crime.
Yeah.
And that is one in relation to the injury which was sustained. Another is the fact that the body was found in a bag. So the question is, who knew and who said anything about being found in a bag beforehand? So who did?
There's one incident where it was described Joan would be found in a bag. That happened early on. That happened in the spring of 1982. There was an anonymous letter received by the Middlesex District Attorney's Office. There were 3 different DA's offices involved in this. That office is where Harvard or Cambridge, Massachusetts is. That office received a letter that Joan would be found in a bag and in the bottom of Walden Pond, which is the legendary Walden Pond. And they received that. I know that they were dredging that as well as other bodies of water that first week of April. And ironically, the Websters were in Cambridge. They stayed in Cambridge every time they went up there. And for a fact, I know that George was mailing out information right in that time frame.
So this letter originated from the Cambridge area by postmark, this anonymous letter talking about her being found in a bag, which she subsequently was. Do we know anything else about who wrote this anonymous letter?
I don't. Now, there is a letter that is written to the FBI, and that is written by George Webster. And that's dated in the same time frame, and the postmark is Cambridge, and they're going into details. He makes an interesting comment. He's wanting to examine if someone flew in on another flight under an alias. There were multiple flights that came in at the same time as Joan's flight.
You mentioned there that there was an anonymous letter which mentioned a bag, and obviously we want to know how somebody knew that she would be found in a bag. So George Webster was sending letters from Cambridge. At the time, an anonymous letter was sent from Cambridge to the District Attorney's Office. And we know that because you have, I see it here before me, a photostat of a letter which was definitely sent by George Webster to the FBI, mailed from Cambridge.